Namaste, Jai Hind. The dream for a Viksit Bharat, the vision for a Viksit Bharat in 2047. And we are on the cusp of budget for 2025 and perhaps going forward, Modi 3.0, the first big budget. Right in front of me is the Vice Chairman NITI Aayog and also Chairman PMEAC, Shri Suman Bery ji. Suman ji, namaste and thank you for your time. So let's start from here, and the conversation is around Viksit Bharat. Yes. The conversation is around double-digit growth and catching up to nations which are far ahead of us. How would you explain this vision for a Viksit Bharat?
Well, I think, let me put it in two terms. Why Viksit Bharat and what is Viksit Bharat? I think Prime Minister was clear because this vision goes back to his speech on Independence Day 2022, as it happened just months after I took over this role. And he is talking about it's being both possible and a duty to deliver a developed society, a modern developed society. This is not primarily about the economy. He believes that we, or the nation, wishes to have the comforts and the opportunities of a developed society. Okay, now what that does require is economic growth, because economic growth, as we'll discuss later, makes other things possible. But he is very clear about two things. One, that if growth is not accompanied by other indicators, by a better quality of life, it's not worth having, which is inclusive growth. And also, second, this is not a technocratic project. It is, as he puts it, a Jan Andolan. And he also refers to the 25 years from 1922 to 1947, where India went from just dreaming about independence to making it happen. And this is the importance of the Amrit Kal.
So 2022 to 2047, a similar Amrit Kal 100 years later, and it also culminates with 100 years of Bharat's independence.
Correct.
So that's why we've got to mobilize our resources. Now, he's also stated somewhere that it's not a compulsion, it's an intention to ensure that we are able to provide for society and to how do we do it? So let's get to how do we achieve this growth? Because you've got money in the pocket, that means you're wealthy, you've got your coffers are full, so then you can do welfare and you can also elevate society. So how do we do that?
Let me start with the point that actually fast growth, although we've succeeded in it, it's really only Prime Minister Modi who has made that an explicit target. And I think that's right. I think the earlier formulation was that you have to choose between growth and inclusion. I think the experience of the last 10 years indicates that with sound policies, you can achieve both growth and inclusion. That's point number one. Point number two is that Prime Minister Modi has a deep belief in India's ability to master technology to accelerate its growth. And I think we have seen this over the last 10 years with DPI, with the various kinds of technological applications in government. And let me say this was new. Earlier, our tech sector was much more interested outside. So I think in exports, the outside market rather than India, I think through things like the India Stack, Aadhaar, Jan Dhan accounts, we have made technology work for us. Third, the budget the last time talked of sectors, but more importantly, it talked of, if you like, focus groups, but also talked about the importance of states and what economists call factors, okay? So a sector is industry, agriculture. A factor is land, labor. And if you want private initiative to flourish, arguably the factors are as important as the sector.
Now, do we see tangible results there? When you're saying working with the states, the captain has a vision, is the team following? Because the federal component has political opposition in play. So do they actually somewhere work with NITI? I know NITI has a governing council and you'd work, but do they actually work? The other thing, Sumanji, was you talk about this Team India aspect. Is a 6%, 7% growth enough? Because there are many who believe that we need to have already touched 11, 12%, or we need to work on a double-digit growth to be able to try and realize the economic might and the economic wealth that we need to create, generate, to become a Viksit Bharat overall.
What I can say to your viewers, and I'm a newcomer, is that for me one of the most impressive moments in my job is to be sitting by the Prime Minister at a meeting of the Governing Council, and the newspapers and the TV channels obviously focus on political friction, and that is part and parcel of being a vibrant democracy, which thank goodness we are. But there is a deep and silent consensus on economic policy in this country, which is one reason why, the momentum has been maintained. And that consensus is evident in meetings of our Governing Council, where you see particularly chief ministers, not only as politicians, which they are, but also as very skilled development practitioners. Okay, so it is a mistake to think that all of their attention is on the politics, because they know they can't be re-elected until they deliver inclusive growth and development. So that's the first point. The second point is that the creation of NITI Aayog actually was a terrific, if you like, step towards decentralization. I know that the media like to present it otherwise, but in the old days, the Planning Commission, our predecessor, used to compel action by the states through reviews and handouts. Now states are sovereign. I mean, they get funds, through, on the one hand, centrally sponsored schemes, and on the other hand, through the Finance Commission. But there's a genuine agreement or reflection that it is on the basis of state performance that state chief ministers will return. So I can say that in the interests of the electorate, Team India does work. While respecting the sovereignty of states, government has been, through various auxiliary funding schemes, trying to nudge states into, as it were, taking the actions to make themselves investment friendly. Now to come to, as it were, the economics of this. What is clear, and this is your 10% point, is that it's easier to grow fast if two things happen. First, you can raise your investment rate, but equally important, it is possible to waste investment, and so you also have to keep an eye on what economists call productivity, because there's no point growing fast if incomes don't keep pace. And incomes keep pace if productivity rises. And productivity rises when there is competition, when there is technology. So it's not straightforward. If your question is, should we be aiming for 10% growth? I would say it should be an outcome. What we need to do is to empower as it were, the micro agents in the economy.
When you say productivity, the aspect of skilling comes into play.
Yes.
Productivity in which sectors is another question. And third, productivity means longer working hours, smarter working hours, or a bit of both?
Well, it's a good point in the sense that people when people make, and they can, comparisons across the rich countries, what we call the OECD, there are two different measures of productivity. Productivity per hour worked and productivity on a kind of annual basis or monthly basis. And the interesting thing is that the US is rich because people work longer. Europe, if you like, is just as efficient, but as it were, their people, for whatever reason, choose to take their, what economists would call welfare in terms of leisure rather than work. So both of them are possibilities. I think the reality is that the great bulk of the Indian population, the labor force, are in the informal sector. And what we're talking about are debates really in the corporate sector. But Anand, if I may, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of talk also about, as it were, the number of jobs and the jobs deficit. And if you would allow me, I just want to put, a gloss on a couple of these. First, I think the Prime Minister has made it very clear, and he's a visionary in this as well, that jobs in the future are likely to be quite different from your standard kind of corporate jobs. And this is true in the West as well with AI. And so we should be talking of productive livelihoods. Second, that I mentioned that quite a large part of the, as it were, reservoir of resources is in our female labor force. And I think that they too can use technology to combine home care with other productive activities. And this is where infrastructure, technology, bandwidth all become sort of relevant. So I don't believe we should be thinking about a jobs deficit of 8 million or 9 million. Yes, it is the case that educated youth are aspiring to formal sector jobs, but the reality is that we have a vast labor force, and our concern should be raising their productivity as well. And in this, MSMEs also become very important.
When we say that we want the labor force to be more productive, but when we are handing them doles or trying to give them a minimum guarantee in terms of income, or putting money in their accounts, is it making them a lazier workforce? How would you see that argument? How do I ensure that I skill the workforce, make them work hard, and pay them, handsome returns? How do we do that? Are we stuck somewhere there between this entire Revdi welfare economics versus a capitalist-oriented outlook where the harder you work, the more you earn?
Well, I think that's certainly the vision of the Prime Minister. And I think it was where he made the point, which is a very insightful point, which is that, and I see this around me, that, India grew great in its, 5,000 years or 2,000 years by embracing risk. And that an aspirational society, which is what we have now, aspirational youth, means that people should be not smothered by being protected from risk, but should be allowed to, as it were, embrace risk. And I think that that is, to some extent, closer to the US mindset. And the question then is, how do you reconcile that with inclusion? And the response of this government over the last 10 years has been to provide some social safety nets. Now, you talked about Dole's and Bery's. We've just come out with a fiscal health index. I think the progress that's been made, Anand, is that state chief ministers, who are very important in this, know that they will not be able to deliver on the long run, in the long run, if the treasuries are bankrupted in the short run.
Green Lamb Laminates presents CNN News 18 Primetime Studio.